From 13 small colonies huddled on the edge of a vast unknown continent to a nation spanning from sea to shining sea. How did that happen? How did a fledgling country, barely holding on after a brutal war for independence, manage to grow into the United States we know today? Well, that's the story we're diving into right now. The incredible, often messy, and absolutely fascinating story of America's early expansion. It all starts in 1776 with the Declaration of Independence. But a declaration is just words on paper. The real test was the Revolutionary War. After years of struggle, the breakthrough came in 1783 with the Treaty of Paris. This wasn't just a peace treaty, it was a deed to a continent. Britain didn't just recognize American independence, it handed over a massive chunk of land. Everything east of the Mississippi River, from the Great Lakes down to Florida, suddenly belonged to this new experimental nation. Imagine that. Overnight, the United States was born with a backyard the size of Western Europe. But owning land on a map and actually controlling it are two very different things. The first major prize was the Northwest Territory, the future states of Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin. This was the Wild West of the 1780s. The government, under the Articles of Confederation, passed the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. This was a genius piece of legislation. It laid out a clear step-by-step process for a territory to become a state, equal to the original 13. It also crucially banned slavery in the region, setting the stage for future conflicts over the issue. This ordinance was the blueprint for American expansion. It promised order, property, and eventual statehood. For thousands of settlers back east, dreaming of their own plot of land, this was an irresistible invitation to head west, over the Appalachian Mountains, into the Ohio Valley. Of course, this land wasn't empty. It was the ancestral home of numerous Native American nations, the Shawnee, the Miami, the Delaware, and many others. They saw the wave of American settlers not as pioneers, but as invaders. This led to decades of brutal conflict, often called the Northwest Indian War. Leaders like Little Turtle of the Miami Confederacy and Blue Jacket of the Shawnee forged powerful alliances and dealt devastating blows to the young U.S. Army. For a while, it seemed they might halt the American advance, but the U.S. was relentless. The conflict culminated in the Battle of Fallen Timbers in 1794, leading to the Treaty of Greenville. In this treaty, the Native Confederacy was forced to cede vast territories, opening up most of modern-day Ohio to settlement. It was a pattern that would repeat itself again and again across the continent. American expansion met with fierce resistance, followed by military conflict and ultimately, land cessions. Now, let's jump to the year 1800. Thomas Jefferson, a man with a grand vision of an empire of liberty populated by small, independent farmers, becomes president. He looked west, beyond the Mississippi, to the vast territory known as Louisiana. It was controlled by Spain, but Jefferson soon heard a terrifying rumor. Spain had secretly ceded it back to France, ruled by the ambitious and powerful Napoleon Bonaparte. Having Napoleon as a neighbor was a geopolitical nightmare. He could choke off American access to the crucial port of New Orleans, the gateway for all trade coming down the Mississippi River. Western farmers would be ruined. Jefferson knew he had to act. He dispatched his envoy James Monroe to Paris with a mission: try to buy New Orleans and maybe a slice of Florida for up to $10 million. But when Monroe arrived in Paris, he walked into the deal of a lifetime. Napoleon Ice's plans for a new world empire had crumbled after a successful slave revolt in Haiti decimated his army. Without Haiti, his prized sugar colony, Louisiana was far less valuable. Plus, he needed cash, and fast, for his upcoming wars in Europe. So his foreign minister made a stunning counteroffer. You want New Orleans? Forget it, take the whole thing. How much can you give us for all of Louisiana? Monroe and the American minister, Robert Livingston, were flabbergasted. They had no authority to make such a massive purchase. There was no time to write to Jefferson and wait for a reply. They had to make a decision on the spot. They haggled and finally settled on a price: $15 million for 828,000 square miles of land. That's about 3 cents an acre. With the stroke of a pen, they doubled the size of the United States. Jefferson, despite his constitutional concerns about presidential power, couldn't pass up the opportunity. The Louisiana Purchase of 1803 was, and still is, the single largest land acquisition in American history. But what exactly had they bought? No one really knew. The maps were vague, the boundaries undefined. It was a vast mystery stretching to the Rocky Mountains and beyond. Jefferson, ever the scientist and explorer, was determined to find out. Even before the purchase was final, he was already planning an expedition. He chose his personal secretary, a young, capable Army captain named Meriwether Lewis, to lead it. Lewis, in turn, chose his former Army commander William Clark as his co-captain. Their mission, known as the Corps of Discovery, was epic. They were to explore this new territory, find a water route to the Pacific Ocean, the mythical Northwest Passage, establish trade with native nations, and document everything they saw: the plants, the animals, the geography. In 1804, the Corps of Discovery, a team of about 40 men, set off from St. Louis heading up the Missouri River. What followed was one of the greatest adventures in American history. They faced grizzly bears, harsh weather, starvation, and grueling terrain. Their journey would have been impossible without the help of the native peoples they encountered. Most famously, Sacagawea, a young Shoshone woman who, with her infant son on her back, served as an invaluable guide and interpreter. She wasn't just a navigator. Her very presence signaled that the Corps came in peace. After 2.5 years and 8,000 miles, Lewis and Clark returned as national heroes. They hadn't found an easy water route to the Pacific, but they brought back something far more valuable: knowledge. Their detailed journals and maps filled in the blank spaces of the continent. They established American claims all the way to the Pacific Northwest and sparked the imagination of the nation. The story of their journey was a siren call, fueling the dream of a nation that spanned the entire continent. This idea that America had a divine right, a manifest destiny to expand westward, was beginning to take powerful hold. So, by 1820, just a few decades after its birth, the United States had transformed. It was no longer just a fragile collection of states on the Atlantic coast. It had pushed its borders deep into the heart of the continent, setting the stage for the conflicts, innovations, and migrations that would define the rest of the 19th century. The dream had been planted, the path had been forged, and the westward march was in full swing. How a young republic, barely out of its infancy, managed to conquer half a continent, shaping itself into the superpower we know today. Imagine a powerful idea, a belief that it was America's God-given right, even its destiny, to expand westward, spreading democracy and civilization across the entire North American continent. It wasn't just about land, it was about destiny, a sense of purpose that fueled exploration, migration, and yes, conflict. This powerful ideology, first coined in the 1840s, became a driving force, pushing Americans to look beyond their eastern borders and dream of a nation stretching from sea to shining sea. It captured the imagination of millions, painting a picture of an America destined for greatness. This belief permeated every aspect of American life, from political speeches to popular literature, and became a justification for almost every major territorial acquisition of the era. Our journey westward truly kicks off with a bang in the 1830s with Texas. Originally a part of Mexico, American settlers, drawn by cheap land and the promise of new beginnings, flocked to the region. However, cultural differences and disagreements over issues like slavery soon led to escalating tensions. By 1836, these tensions exploded into a full-blown revolution. Remember the Alamo? That legendary stand by Texan defenders, though a defeat, rallied support and solidified the Texan resolve for independence. Led by figures like Sam Houston, the Texans fought fiercely, eventually securing their freedom from Mexico and establishing the Republic of Texas. For nearly a decade, Texas existed as an independent nation, a lone star shining brightly on the continent. But the pull towards the United States was strong, and by 1845, Texas was annexed. officially becoming the 28th state. This annexation, however, didn't sit well with Mexico, who still considered Texas theirs, setting the stage for even bigger clashes. The annexation of Texas directly led to one of America's most significant conflicts, the Mexican-American War. Disputes over the border, particularly the Rio Grande, ignited hostilities. From 1846 to 1848, American forces, under generals like Zachary Taylor and Winfield Scott, pushed deep into Mexican territory. It was a war marked by strategic victories but also by immense human cost. When the dust settled, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed. This treaty was monumental. Mexico ceded vast territories, including what would become California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, and parts of New Mexico, Colorado, and Wyoming, to the United States for $15 million. This single acquisition increased the size of the United States by over 25%, a truly staggering gain that reshaped the map of North America forever. It was a controversial war, debated even at the time, but its impact on America's territorial ambitions was undeniable. But expansion wasn't just about war and treaties. It was also about the sheer grit and determination of ordinary people. Enter the Oregon Trail. Beginning in the early 1840s, this legendary route became a highway for hundreds of thousands of pioneers seeking a new life in the Pacific Northwest. Imagine families packing everything they owned into covered wagons, embarking on a perilous 2,000-mile journey that took months to complete. They faced unimaginable challenges: harsh weather, treacherous rivers, disease, and the constant threat of starvation. Yet their dream of fertile land, new opportunities, and a fresh start propelled them forward. The Oregon Trail wasn't just a path. It was a testament to the American spirit of perseverance, and a crucial chapter in the settlement of the West, leading to the eventual establishment of states like Oregon and Washington. These pioneers truly carved out a future with their own hands. Just as the Oregon Trail was bustling, another phenomenon exploded, drawing millions westward: the California Gold Rush. In 1848, gold was discovered at Sutter's Mill, and word quickly spread like wildfire. Suddenly, 49ers from all corners of the globe, Americans, Europeans, Chinese, and Latin Americans, rushed to California, dreaming of striking it rich. Boomtowns sprang up overnight, transforming sleepy settlements into bustling, chaotic hubs. While only a few actually found their fortunes in gold, the gold rush had an immense and lasting impact. It dramatically accelerated the settlement of California, leading to its rapid statehood in 1850. It also fueled economic growth, spurred innovation, and created a multicultural society, albeit one often marked by hardship and conflict. The gold rush wasn't just about gold. It was about the raw energy of human ambition and the rapid creation of new societies in uncharted territories. As the nation expanded and grew, so did the tensions within it. The vast new territories acquired through manifest destiny brought a critical question to the forefront. Would these new states be free or slave states? This issue deepened the chasm between the North and the South, eventually leading to the ultimate test of American unity, the Civil War. From 1861 to 1865, Americans fought against Americans in a brutal and devastating conflict over the fundamental questions of slavery, states' rights, and the very definition of the nation. The war, though horrific, ultimately led to the abolition of slavery and, crucially, to the reaffirmation of the United States as an indivisible nation. It was a period of immense sacrifice, but it forged a stronger, more unified country, allowing it to continue its journey towards becoming a global power. The Civil War tested the very fabric of American society, and its resolution paved the way for the next phase of national development. By the end of the 19th century, particularly around 1898, the United States had transformed. The era of manifest destiny had largely closed, with the continent effectively settled from coast to coast. The nation had grown from a fledgling republic into a formidable continental power. It had built infrastructure, connected its regions with railroads, and developed a robust industrial economy. The wars, annexations, and westward migrations, while complex and often fraught with ethical dilemmas regarding Native American displacement and Mexican sovereignty, undeniably shaped the modern United States. This period laid the groundwork for America's emergence as a global superpower. It's a story that reminds us of the immense forces that can drive a nation forward, for better or for worse, and the enduring legacy of an idea that captured the imagination of a generation. How the United States transformed from a continental giant into an undeniable global superpower. We're talking about Empire of the West, from sea to superpower, covering the period from 1898 right up to the present day. Now, when we think of empire, many minds jump to ancient Rome or colonial Britain. But the U.S. story is unique. It's less about direct conquest and more about a strategic, often complex expansion of influence, both territorial and ideological. Our starting point, 1898, is a pivotal year. The Spanish-American War wasn't just a conflict, it was a springboard that launched the U.S. onto the world stage in a way it never had before. Before 1898, the U.S. was largely focused inwards on its own massive continental expansion. But then, boom. The Spanish-American War changes everything. Suddenly, America finds itself with new overseas territories, the Philippines, Guam, and Puerto Rico. These weren't contiguous states, they were islands thousands of miles away. This marked a profound shift, signaling that the U.S. was no longer content with just dominating its own continent. It now had a global reach, whether it fully realized the implications at the time or not. The acquisition of these territories sparked intense debates at home. Was this truly what America stood for? But the die was cast. And speaking of islands, let's not forget Hawaii. Its annexation in 1898, though a separate event, perfectly illustrates this growing American ambition in the Pacific. With Hawaii, the U.S. secured a vital strategic outpost, a stepping stone that cemented its rise as a Pacific power. Imagine the strategic advantage: a naval base, a coaling station, a crucial link for trade and projection of power across the vast Pacific Ocean. It's impossible to overstate Hawaii's importance in shaping America's future geopolitical landscape. These early moves laid the groundwork for an entirely new kind of American engagement with the world. Then, the 20th century hit, bringing with it two devastating global conflicts, World War I and World War II. While initially hesitant to get involved in the European squabbles, America's economic and industrial might, coupled with its immense human resources, proved decisive in both wars. But it was after World War II that the U.S. truly emerged as the global superpower. Europe was ravaged, its economies shattered. America, relatively untouched by direct conflict on its mainland, stood tall, its factories humming, its economy booming. This wasn't just about military victory, it was about global leadership and rebuilding the world order. This era saw the U.S. take on an unprecedented role in shaping international institutions like the United Nations, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund. These weren't just abstract organizations. They were tools through which America could project its economic and political influence, promoting its values of democracy and free markets. It was a conscious effort to prevent future global catastrophes and to establish a new world order with the U.S. at its helm. The Marshall Plan, for instance, wasn't just humanitarian aid. It was a strategic investment that bolstered European economies and solidified alliances, firmly linking them to the American sphere of influence. Now, as the smoke cleared from World War II, a new kind of conflict began: the Cold War. This wasn't a hot war with direct military clashes between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, but a titanic struggle for ideological supremacy. Here, the expansion of American influence wasn't about acquiring more land, but about projecting power, ideas, and alliances. It was a battle for hearts and minds, played out through proxy wars, espionage, technological races, and cultural exchanges. Think about it: the space race, the arms race, the formation of NATO, the spread of American pop culture. These were all fronts in the Cold War. The U.S. championed democracy and capitalism against the Soviet Union's communism. Its influence wasn't measured in square miles of annexed territory, but in the number of countries allied with it, the economic systems adopted by nations, and the cultural trends sweeping the globe. This was influence on a massive scale, shaping the political map and the very way people lived and thought across continents. So how did all these pieces, the initial territorial acquisitions, the decisive role in world wars, and the strategic maneuvering of the Cold War, combine to make the US the world's biggest superpower? It boils down to a powerful trifecta: economic, military, and cultural reach. Economically, the US became the world's engine. Its massive industrial capacity, its vast consumer market, and the stability of the dollar made it the center of global finance and trade. Nations looked to American investment, American goods, and American economic models. The sheer scale of its economy allowed it to fund massive military endeavors and provide foreign aid, further extending its influence. Militarily, the US developed the most powerful armed forces the world had ever seen. With a vast network of military bases across the globe, cutting-edge technology, and unparalleled naval and air power, it could project force virtually anywhere. This military might not only served as a deterrent, but also allowed the US to protect its interests and allies, reinforcing its position as a global guarantor of security. And then there's the cultural reach. From Hollywood movies to jazz music, from blue jeans to fast food, American culture became a global phenomenon. This soft power, the ability to attract and persuade through appeal rather than coercion, was incredibly potent. It fostered a sense of aspiration and connection, making American ideals and lifestyles desirable in many parts of the world. This cultural influence often paved the way for economic and political connections, creating a powerful, interconnected web of American soft power. From those initial island acquisitions in 1898, the US embarked on a century-long journey, navigating global conflicts, ideological battles, and economic transformations. It wasn't always smooth sailing, and there were certainly periods of intense debate and self-reflection. But through a combination of strategic expansion, decisive leadership in times of crisis, and the sheer power of its economic, military, and cultural dynamism, the United States undoubtedly shaped the 20th century and continues to be a defining force in the 21st. It truly transformed from a continental giant into a global superpower through empire, influence, and ideology. What do you think about America's path to superpower status? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.